Algonquin College responsible to develop the CST 8239 course, which is Windows Server 2016 administration. This is the first video of several I'm going to make to help the student to be able to do their labs. This is just this short video is an introduction to VMware, just to help you with to do your labs. Okay, so it's not a full course on VMware workstation per se. It's just enough for you to support your lab, because you should already know this, but just in case. So here we go. So first of all, the first thing you need is two programs: VMware Workstation program, and you need Windows Server 2016 software. So this is my softwares, and that's my directory where they're loaded. So Réal Boucher, Algonquin College software, and I got VMware version 14, version 15. I'm using version 15 now, and if you look inside, I will have my image, my application, which has already been installed. I won't teach you how to install that. I mean, just click on it and follow the defaults. And there's my license. You can get that. Algonquin College bought a license for all the students, so when you're registered for the course, you all have access to that license and that software. And you'll find that onto the digital resources supplied by Algonquin College. And I think your link will be in Brightspace to go and find that. So I'll assume you can do that on your own. The second thing is to go get the image, disk image, for Windows 2016 server administration. Okay, and you need also your license, which I have here. Once you've downloaded that, you install VMware and you start VMware. So here's when you start VMware. This won't exist. You're going to have my computer and share VMs. That's it, and that's my application. The purpose and objective of VMware is to simulate hardware, because for this course, each student would need 4 physical computers to install 4 Windows Server 2016. It would cost too much for you to buy, or the college to buy for each student. So instead, they bought this simulation software to create virtual physical machine. Okay, so first of all, there's my computers. I already created 2 of them in advance. So now, if you want, I'll create you need 4, so I'll create a third one. And very easy, just follow the instruction. You can go to advanced. I'll go to advanced, but you could use the typical. Then it asks you, I'm using, that's virtual machine hardware compatibility with Workstation 15X. This is the version that I'm using of VMware software. Okay, then it's compatible product with Fusion and Workstation 15. Leave the default there. And here it's asking you where install disk image, from where. I will install the operating system later. What does that mean? That means that I can create my computer, my physical computer, or in our case a virtual computer, a physical machine, and then later on install the operating system. Or you can click here, here, okay? And then I can go to my directory, in my case here, that has my image. That's the directory I showed you a while ago, where my software is, or virtual machine, labs, right here. So right now it's pointing to this directory, Windows Server 2016, looking for this file. So you see it, Réal Boucher, Windows 2016, and there's my file, ISO file. So that means when it's created the virtual machine, when it reboots, it would go to that file and start the installation if my BIOS is set to boot to the CD, which I'll talk about in a second. Or I can click here. In this case here, I just want to show you in this course, and then in the next course, I'll show you how to install Windows 2016 Server. So I'll just create a physical or a virtual computer. So next, and I wanted to install Windows on it, Microsoft Windows. Well, there's all kinds of Microsoft Windows. Here's the list, the whole list of them. In my case, I want to install Windows Server 2016. You can have this virus called Linux, VMware SX, or any others. So we'll leave it here. That eventually will, that doesn't say, this here does not say we're going to install right now Windows Server 2016. It just tells me my machine will be prepared, my physical or my virtual hardware will be prepared to install Windows Server 2016. Then I want to create a virtual machine name. This one I will call server SA1. Okay, that's what I'm going to create. That my computer will name, virtual machine name will be server SA1. The location. This is the location where my virtual machine will be created. That's the directory where it's going to store all my files, because it's just virtual, so it's just a bunch of files. And I have the directory open here, virtual machine. If you look here, that's in my directory, the course, CS28239. I created a directory called VMware. I created it inside that. I created a directory called My Virtual Machine. You see, I already installed DM1 and DC1. I'll talk about that later on. As you can see, there's only 2 virtual machine at this point installed in my VMware. Now I'm going to be installing a third one, which will be called Server SA1. Okay, and then we'll go back and check our directory to see if it created that directory for me. So I go there. Then it says when my machine, my physical machine, or in this case my virtual machine boots up, it can use the BIOS, the old method, or this new BIOS called UEFI. I don't have time to explain that. Hopefully you already know, because you do have a hardware course here that you should already taken in semester 1, and I think there's a second, and there's also a piece in semester 2. So I'll assume you already know that. And the reason that's important is that when you create your virtual machine and when it boots up, you might have to go and change where it boots from. Okay, so you wanted at first, in my case, to boot from the CD-ROM, which is my ISO, so when we do the installation. After that, you want it to boot from the hard drive to boot the operating system. So right now, we're going to keep the default. And then, how many processors do you want? Number of processors, number of core per processor. Now, I make some recommendation, my configuration file. I'll go and show you my configuration file. It's open. So for the lab for this semester, this is my configuration file for Windows 16, but it also has the virtual machine configuration. So there's 4 of them. So right now I'm building, there's 4 virtual machines we're going to create. I already have server DC1 created. That's its configuration. I have server DM1 created. That's its configuration. I did not create server DM2. That would be its configuration. Right now, the example I'm using, I'm configuring server SA1. Oh, I've put a space I shouldn't on my virtual machine. And there's the hardware description. So my virtual machine, the physical computer or the virtual computer, will be called server SA1. I would like to have 2 gigabyte of memory or more. The more you have, faster it's going to be. Hard disk, 60 gig, you're going to create a couple of hard drive, and then we're going to install later on this server. Oh, I don't tell you how many core. I thought I did, but I didn't. Maybe at the top. Oh yes, there. 1 core, 2 threads. Okay, and 2 gigabyte. That's where. So that's what we're going to use. Go back. So number processor, core, 1 core. Okay, so we'll leave the, for this case, in my case, I'll leave the default. You can increase it, and that makes your virtual machine run a little bit faster. You can change it afterward if you want. There's the 2 gig, that's the default, that's good enough, that's memory. And then it asks me what I want to use. The default, that's my network connection. Every computer will be connected on a network. So VMware, automatically when it's created, when you start VMware, by default it creates a network for you. It creates actually several networks for you. There's a bridge network that already exists in VMware. Use a network address. It's already created for you. They're host only network. And then do not use network connection. We'll leave the default, but we will be changing it afterwards, which I'll teach you. So if I say next, we'll keep the hard drive, the SCSI, create a new virtual disk, use an existing virtual disk. We're going to create a new virtual disk. We'll leave the default. I don't have time to explain every single step. That's not the objective. I just want you to get started to do your lab. Here, split the virtual disk into multiple files, or store virtual disk in a single file. I always use a single file. You can use multiple files. You can read what it says. It's up to you. It's a preference that you have. Okay. Then the disk file, 60 gig. That will be the file name of that, because we simulated. It's not a real physical hard drive. It's a file on my drive that creates a simulation of a hard drive, a physical drive. Say yes. There's the configuration. Ready to create virtual machine. Finish. Boom. There's server SA1. Now we have 3 physical or virtual machine. And that's the setting. If I highlight this one, that would be the setting of this one. That's this configuration. Okay? We can power it on. But before we do, you see the network is attached to NAT. There's a hard drive. There's a processor, memory. Okay? Now, this is my configuration. I want to attach it to a different network. In our course, we're going to create our own network. Mine is created, but I'll show you how to do that. But first, I'm going to go and show you. I want to create VNet 8. And this will represent my VNet 8. And automatically, when I create this network, now I don't have time to teach you what is a network. You take this, the Cisco course. You took a Cisco course in level 1. You're taking level 2. If you do not know what's a network by now, then you're in deep doo-doo. Okay, so I'll assume you know what's a network. Here, what I want to show you in VMware is how to create this network, because we're going to be creating a network called VNet 8. And then you will get an IP address for that network, which will be 192.168.w. The W will be different for each one of you and for myself, .0. That will represent the network. When you create that network, VMware also creates a router attached to this network. And that router supports a program called NAT, Network Address Translation. I don't have time to go through that. This will permit you to go into the internet. Okay, that's the path to get to the internet. 98% of your lab, you don't need to go on the internet. It's going to be local on this network when we create our virtual machine. So the next step is to attach our computers to that network. all 4 of them. Okay, and when you do that, it will look something like this. You'll have server DC1, so you have to attach the network to it, to all 4 machines. Okay, that's what we're trying to accomplish. So if I go back to VMware, I have 3 machines so far. The one we just showed you to create, you create all 4 machines the same way if you want. The next thing is the network. See, if you go to Edit, Virtual Network Editor, in there, you can create networks. There are some defaults. I created this one, VNet NAT. You should already know how to do that. If you don't, all you have to do is go and where's my add button, create a new, hang on, add network. Cancel. I forget. There should be how to get there. I forget. Son of a bee. Why? Oh, maybe I'm not administrator. I didn't log in as administrator, I think. Okay, that's why they're shaded out. I can't. So you have to be administrator. I would have to log in as administrator. Okay, so forget that for now. But if you did log in as administrator, you have add network. That's why. So you'd add network and you'd call it VNet 8 and select NAT like I did here. And then automatically it would create this network. So right now, this VNet 8 is this here. By doing this, it creates this router NAT. And I'll go and show you. Even though I'm not an administrator. Okay. See NAT settings. See my default gateway. I could change that right now. I'm not administrator. So 192.168.78. 78 is my W. Dot 2. Dot 2 is the address of the router, my gateway, default gateway, also known as a router. Okay, so that's what that is. So now if I get out of that and I go to SA1 and I go to its settings, the hardware setting, my virtual machine setting, that's why virtual machine, and I went to settings. And here's the setting of my hardware. There's my network. It's sitting over here on that. I don't want that. I want it to go to, over here, my custom specific virtual network, and I want them to go to VNet 8. Now I took this network adapter and physically connected it, or virtually connected it, to my network. So all I did is like putting a cable onto that network. And my router, my gateway, when I configure my, my operating system here, I want it to go to the default gateway. So if I look at my configuration file, what is my W? Well, my W, just like I showed you, is my VNet 8, 192.168.78. So in my case, my network is 78. That's my W in my configuration file right here. That's my VNet 8, that's my W. In your case, it could be 78, not 78, 100, it could be 50, I don't know. So you'll have to take note of your network. So all my computers on this cable will have 192.168.w dot something. My configuration file tells you DC1. When you install the operating system, right now we did not install the operating system on the machine. When you do, you'll configure the IP address to be W, in my case 78.11. The gateway will be 78.2, etc., etc. Right now we configured, we just created that machine. That machine, we did not install Windows Server 2016. So we can't configure the IP address until we install the operating system, which I'll teach you in the second video. But for the purpose of learning here, to understand what we're trying to do, I already have a server already installed with Windows 16 installed on it. Okay, so if I look at the setting, the hardware setting of this virtual machine, it is connected to VNet 8. Okay, so it has the same address, 192.168.78.11. That's what it should have. So now if I power up this virtual machine, okay, as it boots up, hopefully I remember my password. I think I used the password that's in the book. But we'll talk about that when we get to, while it's booting up, I want to show you my configuration file. Now your labs in the book uses Hyper-V as to create virtual machine. We do not use Hyper-V. The college basically wants to use VMware. All other class uses VMware. We were using VMware before Hyper-V was invented, so we're still on there, and most of the students in other class use that. So in the lab manual, when it says to use Hyper-V, we don't. It does the same thing. Okay, so what we done, we created a virtual machine, SA1. That's the hardware configuration. Then we're going to configure, we're going to install the operating system. That's the second step. Some of you will do it as you install the machine, create the virtual machine. I'm doing in two steps for my two videos. Okay, so I'll show when I get there. But that's the configuration here. In the book, they use different types of configuration. They use a different name. They use a different password. They will use a different IP address. I want you to use this here. Okay? So let's go back to see if it's up and running, just to show you what it looks like. So there. So obviously I'm logged in already, so I didn't set a password. We'll cancel that. Network connection, my Ethernet, and I want to show you that I went to IPv4 because that's what we're using, properties, and there's my address, and that's for DC1. So if you go back to my configuration file, I'm using DC1, my hardware configuration, and then when I install Windows Server 2016 called the data center, I didn't put a password, but you should put password, and then the host name or the computer name will be called Server DC1, which is the same name as the VMware, my physical machine, or my virtual machine, Server DC1. The host name or computer name are also going to be called DC1. And then my IP address is, in my case, my W78.11 gateway, and those will be by DNS. This is the Algonquin College DNS. We'll learn DNS later on, just enter those DNS address. This is the Google DNS, and this will be your DNS. You don't have one installed right away, but later on we will install a DNS when we learn about it on our DC1. Okay, so if we go back to our virtual machine, there's my address that I entered, there's the mask, there's the default gateway, and there's my DNS IP addresses. I entered the Algonquin College DNS to be able to serve the internet. Google DNS, in case this one is down, it'll go to the Google DNS to serve the internet. And then there's the my address of this particular machine, which eventually I will install a DNS on it. Okay, so that's basically it for installing VMware. So again, to recap, you do have to create a virtual network called VNet 8. When you log in, you'll log in as administrator, and then you can have add network, and you're going to create VNet 8, select NAT, shared host IP address with this virtual machine, so that permits you to go to the internet, and then that's it. And then take note of that and put it in your configuration file so that in case you forget what it is. If you don't, you can come back here. Then you have to go to each of these machines and attach it. Okay? Attach the network adapter. The other thing here, if you look at the options, it also shows you working directory. And now I forgot, I got to go and show you this. You see here, that's the directory where it stored my virtual machine, because it's just virtual, so it's just software to simulate hardware. So if I go to my directory structure, which I showed you at the beginning, my virtual machine, when I started, I showed you I had DM1, and this is my DC1, Windows Server 2016. Okay, and there's my server SA1. And these are my file to support my virtual machine to simulate my hardware. And if you look at the size, and you can do that, properties, the size of the file on disk is 7.56 megabyte. Later on, when you install the operating system in there, you'll have many, many other files, and you can look at the size. And that's your simulation of the hardware and the software installed on it. That's where it puts them. Now, I want to clarify something here that maybe you were questioning yourself on when you saw this here. I had DC1, DM1, SA1. My directory structure does not reflect that, and I'll explain why. And I did on purpose so because some of you might have and will do, and get that problem. Oh, I'm in the wrong place, virtual machine. So, DM1, SA1, Windows Server 2016. You do not see DC1 as shown here. DC1, DM1, SA1. Why is that? The reason being is because, and some student had confusion with that, when I did the installation of DC1, I called the virtual machine. It asked me for a virtual machine name. I called it Windows Server 2016. So when my virtual machine was created, this was called Windows Server 2016. Then what I did, once I built it, I came here and I said what? Rename. I said rename. Then I changed the name from Windows Server 2016 to Server DC1. What it did, it changed the name here in the application. It did not go to the directory and update the directory and change that to Server DC1. It left it as Windows Server 2016. So that can be confusing. So if you do not when you install, you create your virtual machine. If you give it a name, that's the name. It'll create the file. It'll use that name to create the directory, and not the file, the directory, to put all the files in. If afterward you change the name, in the application, it will change the name in the application only, not the directory. But if you look at VM settings of DC1, it tells you, it puts all the working files for that virtual machine into Server 2016. That's the directory. That's because when you first created the machine, that's what you called it, then you change it afterwards. So that should eliminate the confusion about looking for the directory, if you want to back up your files, copy them somewhere else in case they get corrupted, and it does happen. So it'd be nice to save them. Now, if we go back to that directory, virtual machine, if I go to DM1 or DC1, if I look at the properties, look at the size, 15.3 gigabyte. The one we just created, which has no operating system installed on it, 7.6 megabyte. So in the next video, when I teach you how to install Windows 2016 onto that virtual machine, SA1, then you can go look at the size of the directory. Okay, so that's it. That's it for this video. All we've done is created that one machine, server SA1. That's all we've done. That's been created for you, and that's been installed Windows 16. Okay, so see you on the next video. Thank you very much and if you have any feedback for this video, how to improve it, make it better, just let me know. You have my email address, and you know where my office is, and you have my phone number or my extension. We can meet. We can discuss how we can improve this video. Any constructive criticism will be welcome. Thank you very much, and good luck in your semester. Amen.